Hi, I'm Johnson Lam from Kaki DIY. This particular video is kind of long because it's a complete walkthrough of how you assemble an Ender 3 3D printer. So usually what I do is I'll lay out all the things. Pillars will go behind, the power supply or cable, the filament holders will put it further away because those are the stuff that you don't use it yet. And the rest of the electronics and the screws and all, you keep it nearer to the base. And of course, the printing surface is also the last, right? So here are all the parts and tools that they give you for free. Now you have the spatula and you have the Allen keys, which I won't open the new one because I have my old ones that I can use. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing I do is I'll make sure that the cables are all unentangled because if not, you'll be all over the place and it's very hard for you to, number one, set it straight and flat, and number two, install it properly. Alright, so I remove everything from the bed first because the first thing that I always do is to make sure that the bed is very smooth and it's not shaking. Because I've been installing a lot of Ender 3s and some of it came with a rather shaky bed, and it's all because of the rollers aren't tight enough, right? So make sure that it's not shaking, and let's check the rollers. Okay, this particular one is quite tight, not too bad. It's actually a little bit too tight. Okay, so now I'm going to just loosen it a little bit. Right, just use the Allen key and slightly loosen them. Okay, and at the same time you can use the spanner to turn on the eccentric nut, and that will actually loosen and make the rollers go further away. Okay, so those of you who are familiar with automotive, eccentric nut is just like your camber nut, so the more you turn it, the more it will twist the axis away. Okay, so you have to try it sometimes clockwise and counterclockwise because we don't know where the position is, so sometimes clockwise gets you further away from the axis, and sometimes counterclockwise does the same thing. Okay, so now seems like it's moving quite well. Okay, you can actually feel it with your hands. If it's too tight, you will feel that the rollers are actually struggling and you will like jumping a little bit, top, 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 something like that. And if it's too loose, the whole bed will be shaking. Okay, so I'm just trying to feel to make sure that it's as smooth as possible. Okay, yeah, a lot of beginners make this mistake because they tighten it to be very, very tight, and in the end the whole bed is all like jumpy because it's struggling, the rollers are struggling to turn. Okay, and next is to make sure that the base is actually flat and stable. I have to apologize because this particular table is a little bit not stable, so you will see that the 3D printer jumping here and there sometimes. Next, we'll be unwrapping these two profile pillars. This is for the Z-axis left and right profile. So on your assembly guide, this is actually step 1. However, you have to make sure which one is the left and the right. The one on the right is for your power supply. There will be 2 screws on the top and the bottom, and the one on the left and the right at the bottom, that's for your left Z-axis profile. Alright, now it's time to take out the screws that we are going to need. Oh, this one you'll be careful. Look at this. This is the cleaning needle for your nozzle. Seems like it's poking out and it's quite dangerous because you might poke yourself. Okay, the screw that you need will be the largest one, which is M5 x 45. 2 of them for the left profile and 2 of them for the right profile. When you're screwing these 2 screws in, make sure that it is not tightened all the way yet. Okay, just enough for it to hold it firmly, because we will need to readjust to make sure that this pillar is perpendicular to the other pillars and also is straight and level. I will show you later on. Now we go to step 4 in the Ender tree assembly guide, which is to install the Z-axis, the Z-axis motor. Okay, so this one you need the M4 times 18P screw, so which is only a pair of them, so it's very easy to see and it's black in color. Don't tighten the screw too tightly as well, because we'll need to do some adjustments later. Okay, now let's go and install the stopper switch for the Z-axis. So loosen up the 2 screws and be careful, don't loosen it up too much, as the nut behind the screw might just fall off. Okay, so once you're done, you can just slide it into the rail. Make sure that the switch is facing upwards, and then what I do is usually I spin the screw quickly so that the nut turns 90 degrees and engaged. Okay, so once it's firm, you can go ahead and tighten this as low as possible as you can. Okay, since we have done this part, we can go ahead and connect the Z-axis stopper switch to the cable. Okay, there are 2 cables down there. One is the one with the smaller head, that's for the stop switch, and the one with the thicker, the wider head, is for the motor. Okay, connect both of them firmly, and okay, at least the cables are done. This is an additional step which I actually learned from Chuck from Filament Friday. Use a square to make sure that this profile pillar is straight, okay, on all directions. Okay, so of course straight up is usually quite correct. Okay, make sure that, because remember we did not tighten the screw, we can twist the pillar to make sure that it is square and perpendicular with the base and also the pillars. Now we can tighten up the screws. Next, we will go ahead to step 5 in the assembly guide, which is to install the X-axis, the X pillar for our Ender tree. As these 2 pillars are the same size, it's very easy to see which one is the X-axis pillar and which one is the top pillar. The top pillar is the one with 4 holes, and the X-axis has 6. So now we have to decide which one is facing the front and which one is to the left. Okay, the one with the 3 holes close together is the one for the left, and this part on the right is actually for the rollers, which will be for the right pillar. And there's also, you can see there's a larger hole. It's for the clearance for the nut over here on the roller. Okay, so the one from the left, there's also one with a larger hole. Okay, it's for the clearance for this extruder part. So just make sure that the one that is facing the front don't have the larger holes, and you can try to fit it in. It should fit in perfectly. You need 4 pieces of M4 16 screws for this, 2 for the extruder part. Easier way is just to put them through the hole, because you have to install it from inside the extruder housing itself, and then slowly tighten it, and then you can put in your Allen key through the other hole that is provided on the housing to tighten them. And for this particular part as well, just tighten it firmly but not all the way tight, because we still have to do some calibration. It's perfect when it's firm enough, but it will move when you give some pressure, because now we are going to put the rollers into the profile. Make sure that it can move freely, and we are going to calibrate the level of this axis next. First, we double check to make sure that the pillar is square to the base, and the next most important part is to make sure that the X-axis is square to the Z-axis. Once you're satisfied with it, just slowly slide the whole axis out and tighten the screws. You can repeat it a few times to make sure that you get it really straight, because this part is very important. Once you get both the z-axis and the x-axis really squared, your printing will come out to be very nice. And actually, for the older printers, these are the only axes that's needed to run a 3D printer. The other side profile is just as a stabilizer. Now with the x-axis in, I just make sure one more time that everything is squared. It's squared to the bed and it's also squared to the base. And I tighten the left profile pillar once and for all. Make sure it's very tight, as this will be the workhorse, the pillar with the most stress. For the next step, we are going to put on the lead screw that will hold up the x-axis. Well, this is the part I don't like because the lead screw sometimes can be very greasy. But at the same time, some of the enders that I've assembled, the lead screw came dry. Not sure why as well. Okay, it's very simple. Just hold it with the cover on and slowly just screw and slide them in. Actually, if you let it free fall, it should screw itself in and drop it down to the hole. Okay, remember I told you not to tighten the bottom motor. I accidentally tightened this one, so I have to loosen it to enable the lead screw to drop into the holder properly. Once it's in, go ahead and tighten the screw for the lead screw holder. And once it's tight, both the top and the bottom one, you can go ahead and tighten the screw that holds the axis motor to the frame. You should now able to freely move the x-axis up the z-axis, and the lead screw will turn with the motor. And once that's done, the next step is we can go ahead and install the printhead. However, we need to put in the belt first. So if you are getting the newer Ender 3s, you will get an x-axis belt and also a spare y-axis belt. So since we are going to install the top one, so it's the x-axis belt, yes, for this one. And for the bottom one over here, that's the y-axis belt. To double confirm, you can look at this coupling here. It will say X. So x-axis it is. And it is slightly longer than the y-axis. Let's go ahead and remove the printhead first. And then let's align the belt. Make sure that it doesn't, entangle or turn the other way around. Make sure that the teeth part is facing inside, which means the smoother part is facing upwards. And make the loop at the gearing of the motor. Okay, push it through, and it will be going from the top of the x-axis bar to the bottom of the bar. Once the belt is aligned, just slide back the printhead and go ahead and attach one end of the belt buckle to the bottom of the printhead. For the Ender 3s, you are supplied with this old type of x-axis tensioner. Go ahead and unfasten the screws, and you're going to slide it into the x-axis pillar and fasten them. We are just going to fasten them using hand first, because later on, after the belt has been hooked on, we are going to tighten it using a trick that I can teach you. Now make sure that it can move freely, and actually with this setup you can actually run prints with it already, because the previous version of Ender without the supporting pillar is just this particular axis. You have the X, Y and Z. Okay, now we can use the square to make sure that everything is squared for the last time, because after this part, the rest of the pillars are just supporting pillars, and you just build it up without any fear that it will be impacting the quality of the print. The rest of the steps after this point is not so stressful anymore. It will be the roller for the x-axis. These rollers will go on to the support pillar that we will install on the right side. Okay, let's turn it around so that you can see it clearer. and let's put it up. Make sure that the roller parts of it is facing the back because the rollers are the one that's going to be going on top of the support pillar. The screws will be the M4 16 screws. Now we get the right profile pillar and just slide it in between the rollers. It should go in smoothly and straight because we already squared off the other profile pillar and the x-axis. So what we need to do, okay, if the roller is too tight, we just need to loosen it. But for this case, the roller is actually a little bit too loose, so I just tighten it up, right? And once that's done, I can go ahead and install the two screws at the bottom from the chassis to the profile pillar. Now I will take this opportunity to tighten up the x-axis belt tensioner. So I have a tip here. You can just use another Allen key to give pressure to the belt while you tighten the screws for the tensioner. Alright, so if it's too loose, tighten it a little bit more. Use the Allen key to give pressure and then tighten both the screws. Next is to put in the Bowden tube, which is the PTFE tube, into the holder. So for this particular one, it depends on which Ender 3 version did you get, because there were the Ender 3 versions that are using the old pneumatic coupler and the new ones which is using the push type. I have another video down here showing you the difference in these couplings. The last pillar to install will be the top pillar. For this, we need 4 pieces of M525 and make sure that the one with the bigger holes are facing up so that the head of the screw can go through. You can screw them tight, but take turns from left to right to make sure that they are both consistently tight. Okay, once it's done, next will be the power supply. This one will be fastened using 2 pieces of silver colored screw, and this particular screw is M420. Out of the so many Enders that I've been installing, only once I've been getting black screws for this. Okay, so it will be a silver one. We will then connect all the cables, but before that, make sure that they are not entangled together. Start off with the power cable, which is the one with the big yellow XT60 connector. Okay, yeah, just snap them together. These are the only 2 connectors that can match with each other. And then next, we'll make sure that all the other connectors to the motors are fastened correctly. Even if they are factory pre-installed, just make sure that it's tight and firmly fastened. And now for the x-axis part, there will be a few couplings you need to make sure that it's correct. There will be an extruder motor coupling and the x-axis. So the extruder one will be labeled with E and x-axis will be with an X. These are big couplings, the big connectors, and there will be an X for a small connector, so that will go inside the housing for the stop limit switch. Okay, so it goes inside and easily we just snap it in place. If not, we just use an Allen key to help us secure it. This is the part where I leave it until almost the last one. In your assembly guide, it is actually step 2. So you first connect the connector to COM3. So COM3 will connect to the screen, and then you'll be fastening this using 2 pieces of screw, which is M5 times 8. So at this point, all the electronics has been hooked up. So I can usually, at this point, I turn on the power to make sure everything is working. You can actually start to warm up the bed as well and to check all the axes. So with this, actually the printer is done. So let's put on the surface of the bed, clip it on. You can start doing your bed leveling here. And the last part to install is actually the spool holder, the filament spool holder. And sometimes people don't use the original Ender 3 spool holder because you can either 3D print the one with the roller or actually just use some other third-party spool holders. Alright, that's the complete walkthrough of how you install an Ender 3. For the other Ender 3 related videos or other 3D printing videos, do check out this channel, subscribe, like, and do comment on how I can improve in the future videos. Thank you very much. See you later.